for more on why Asian countries have been hit so hard, we're joined by Amitendu Palit. He's a research lead of trade and economics from South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Now, Dr. Palit, President Trump has sent tariff letters to 14 countries, including top trading partners and allies. What message is the US really sending to Asia with this renewed pressure, you think?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I think what we are getting to see is a new phase in the tactical round of negotiations that the United States has been engaging in with its various partner countries in Asia. So, if we look at the letters that have gone out till now and compare them with what had been proposed earlier, and in the graphics that you were sharing, in most cases, what we are seeing is that there is a little bit of difference, if not any difference at all, vis-a-vis the tariffs that were originally proposed. And for Japan and Korea, in fact, the tariffs in the new letters have gone up by 1%, whereas for Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, maybe there's a slight reduction. Also for Bangladesh. I think this is also a second phase of communication by the Trump administration to these countries to convey the fact that, look, the room for negotiations is still there. The door has not been closed. We are ready with the reciprocal tariffs, but if over the next 3 weeks, that is still the 1st of August, if you would want us to accept your demands, we would consider moving away from the tariffs that we want to charge you. I think that is basically what we are, looking at as far as the US is concerned.
Now, we'll look at each country specifically a little bit later on, but the White House says that the 1st August deadline is firm, but not 100%. With shifting timelines and open-ended terms, what kind of impact does this ambiguity have on investor sentiment and trade planning across Asia?
The impact is significant. I think the biggest impact that one can foresee is that as far as a lot of Asian businesses are concerned, and particularly from the countries that are at the receiving end of the tariffs, and more countries will pretty soon join the line, they are unable to determine what eventually will be the cost of their products in the United States, because that will depend upon the eventual tariffs that are imposed. It is not clear what these tariffs will be and from when they will be applicable, because again, the United States says that August 1st is a possibility but not a certainty. So what that means is there's going to be huge disruption as far as booking of orders, invoicing of commodities, and overall organization of regional supply chains are concerned. It's going to be extremely difficult for shippers to organize cargo according to the disruptions that are taking place. It's going to be very difficult for businesses to engage in any kind of long-term planning on the basis of what we are going to see. And I suppose there is another issue which is going to become serious for most Asian countries. There is a clause on transshipment which the United States is beginning to focus on. And this is ostensibly to ensure that transshipped products from countries of relatively low tariff to the United States market, supposedly passed on by countries with relatively higher tariffs, are not going to be entertained, and they are going to be put on even higher tariffs. I mean, this is something which we have seen in the US trade deal signed with Vietnam, where it has been told to accept a transshipment tariff rate of 40%. Now, these kind of tariff rates, something on the final product, something on transshipment, one doesn't know in what way, what kind of schedules, and what kind of commitments are going to come up. And one also should not let away the fact that there are going to be non-tariff barriers also that are going to be put in place. So I think all in all, if this continues for some more time, we are really going to see a sharp contraction in the volume of trade, and particularly in export prospects from Asia.
Now, on your comment of shipping, the Asian nations dominate the latest tariff list, from Malaysia and Indonesia to Thailand and Bangladesh. Can these countries realistically restructure trade flows to meet US demands, or are global supply chains simply too entrenched to pivot quickly?
I think in the short term, it's going to be very difficult for these countries. given the fact that they are hugely dependent on the American market for their exports. And the export earnings they mobilize as a result go a long way in building their foreign exchange reserves and larger economic prospects. It's not going to be easy to diversify. But over time, something different is expected to happen. And assuming that the tariffs actually are applied whenever they do and at whatever levels, the goods of imports into the American economy are going to become much more expensive. So the American consumer is going to face much higher prices than what the average consumer is facing right now. And as a result of that, the consumer will have to make choices depending upon their availability and affordability. Now, what that essentially means is that many exports from Asia will not be able to get into the American market the way they are getting in right now. But at the same time, the American economy's ability to grow will also reduce because there's going to be higher inflation, and that inflation is going to take away the real content of economic growth in the United States. So I think that is why there is, by and large, very strong consensus and at the same time apprehension over the fact that these tariffs are really going to bring in all around economic contraction. And it is not just the Asian economies that are going to suffer. They are going to have a ripple effect all across the world. And the prospects of a recession in the short term cannot be ruled out at all.
Now, Dr. Palit, very quickly, so what strategic play for Asian economies now? Rush to cut deals before August or hold out and wait for clarity after the US election cycle? How should trade ministries balance long-term interests against short-term tariff risk?
My feeling is that some Asian economies which does not have sufficient room or strength for negotiation with the United States and are too dependent on the US market will be forced to offer the kind of concessions that the US wants from them. And they are going to enter into bilateral trade deals just to escape the tariffs. But there are other countries like Japan and South Korea, for example, and also countries like India with whom negotiations are going on, who are unlikely to relent to the US demands the way the United States would want them to. So I think we are going to see two kinds of outcomes in this regard. One, a basic tactical retreat on part of most Asian economies that we are talking about, mostly the smaller to medium-sized economies. They would be playing ball with the United States on the demands, but we are going to see the relatively more larger Asian economies headed by China to actually put up a resistance to the US demands. And for them, probably the United States will not have much option rather than keeping on negotiating and then hoping at some stage some equilibrium will be achieved, because sooner or later it's going to become enormously costly for the US itself to continue this exercise.
Many thanks for those insights. We've been speaking to Amitendu Palit, Research Lead of Trade and Economics from South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Thank you.